Martell Holt, whose long-running legal disputes have included financial disagreements, custody matters, and repeated court developments over time. Just when things seem to settle, new issues continue to appear, keeping the case active. In this case, the court had already ruled that $7,000 was owed, and that decision was final and legally binding. However, the payment was not completed, which led to further legal action. When a court order is ignored, the system moves forward with stronger enforcement methods. One of these is wage garnishment, which allows money to be taken directly from a person's income through legal channels. At this point, payment is no longer optional or based on cooperation. It becomes automatic and controlled by the court until the debt is fully paid. Because of delays, the original amount has also increased to over $8,000 due to interest and added fees. This shows how quickly financial obligations can grow when they are not addressed on time. Wage garnishment itself follows strict legal limits, usually taking a portion of a person's disposable income while still allowing them to meet basic needs. However, it continues regularly and consistently until the full amount is recovered. This process also involves employers or financial institutions who are legally required to follow court instructions, provide necessary information, and transfer withheld funds accordingly. Even if employment changes, the order does not simply disappear and can continue through new income sources. Public reaction to the situation has been divided, with some seeing it as accountability and others believing it should have been resolved earlier. Overall, this case highlights how unresolved obligations can escalate over time and how legal systems step in when voluntary payment does not happen. What started as a set amount has now turned into a structured enforcement process that continues until the debt is cleared, showing that the situation is no longer about discussion, but about active legal execution. As the process continues, it becomes clear that wage garnishment is not a one-time action, but an ongoing legal mechanism. Payments are collected in a structured way over time, meaning portions of income are automatically withheld and sent through official channels until the debt is fully satisfied. There is no flexibility based on personal choice once the order is active, and the system operates consistently in the background regardless of outside discussions or opinions. What makes this stage significant is that it removes the need for cooperation between the two parties. The court system and employers handle the process directly, which ensures that the debt is being addressed without delays or negotiation. This also means that every payment brings the total balance closer to being resolved, even if the process itself takes time to complete. At the same time, this situation reflects how financial disputes can escalate when they are not handled early. A relatively fixed amount can grow once legal fees, interest, and enforcement steps are added. Over time, what might have been a straightforward resolution becomes a longer and more structured legal process. For those following the situation, it serves as a reminder that court rulings carry real consequences. Once a judgment is made, it is not just a statement, it becomes an enforceable order. If it is not followed voluntarily, the legal system has built-in steps to ensure compliance. In the end, this stage represents the shift from discussion to execution. The decision has already been made, the process has already started, and now it simply continues step by step until everything is fully settled. At this point, the situation also highlights how once a case reaches enforcement, it becomes less about debate and more about procedure. The court's role is no longer to revisit what was decided, but to ensure that the decision is carried out exactly as ordered. That means every step is documented, monitored, and processed through official systems designed specifically for compliance. For the person who owes the debt, this stage can feel unavoidable because the process does not rely on personal action anymore. Instead, it is handled through structured channels where payments are deducted and transferred automatically. While this may seem strict, it is intended to ensure fairness in enforcing court judgments and preventing prolonged non-payment. Meanwhile, for the other party involved, this step represents closure in a legal sense because it confirms that the court is actively working to recover what was ruled. Even though the timeline may vary depending on income and payment structure, the direction of the process is already set and continues until completion. This also explains why such cases often remain in public discussion for extended periods. Once enforcement begins, it can take time for the full amount to be recovered, especially when payments are spread out over months or longer. During that time, updates, filings, and procedural steps may continue to surface, keeping attention on the case. Ultimately, this phase shows how the legal system is designed to move from judgment to execution without needing ongoing approval from either party. Once the ruling is final and enforcement begins, the process becomes self-sustaining, ensuring that obligations are fulfilled through consistent, regulated action until the matter is fully resolved. As the enforcement process continues, it becomes clear that this stage is largely about consistency and completion rather than new decisions. Once wage garnishment is in place, the focus shifts to ensuring that payments are collected steadily and applied correctly until the full balance is cleared. Each deduction brings the remaining amount closer to zero, even if the process takes time to fully conclude. Over time, this kind of legal enforcement also demonstrates how structured the court system is when it comes to unpaid judgments. Everything follows a defined process, from the initial ruling to collection methods, ensuring that outcomes are carried out in a predictable and regulated way. This structure is designed to prevent cases from remaining unresolved indefinitely and to ensure that financial obligations are not avoided. It also shows how legal and financial responsibility continues even when communication between parties has broken down. The system is built to operate independently of personal agreement, meaning that enforcement continues based solely on the court's order rather than cooperation or discussion between individuals involved. As a result, the situation gradually moves away from conflict and toward resolution, not through negotiation, but through structured completion. While the timeline depends on income, deductions, and legal requirements, the direction of the process is already fixed. It continues in the background until the debt is fully satisfied and the case is officially closed. In the end, this phase represents the final stretch of a legal cycle, where a decision made in court is carried through to its conclusion step by step, ensuring that what was ordered is ultimately fulfilled. As the process moves forward, the overall situation becomes less about new developments and more about follow-through. Once a wage garnishment order is active, the legal system essentially shifts into a maintenance phase where the main goal is steady collection until the balance reaches zero. There are no major changes required at this point unless there is a significant legal update, such as a modification of the order or proof that the debt has been fully satisfied. During this stage, each payment taken through garnishment is automatically tracked and applied to the outstanding balance. This creates a clear record of progress, ensuring that both the court and involved parties can see how much has been paid and how much remains. Even though the process may feel slow, it is designed to ensure accuracy and consistency over time rather than speed. It's also important to understand that this phase is largely procedural. Most of the legal decisions have already been made, so what remains is execution. The court is no longer determining whether the debt exists, it is simply ensuring that the repayment process continues as ordered. Because of this, the system is built to run in the background with minimal intervention unless something changes legally or financially. From a broader perspective, cases like this often illustrate how legal enforcement systems are structured to prioritize finality. Once a judgment enters enforcement, the goal is to bring it to completion rather than reopen debate. That is why these processes can continue for extended periods, especially when payments are spread out over time. In the end, the situation gradually transitions into closure. While it may not feel immediate, each step of the process moves it closer to resolution. When the full amount is eventually recovered, the order is satisfied, the enforcement ends, and the case is formally closed, marking the completion of the legal process from judgment to full enforcement. At this stage, the focus naturally shifts to the final outcome of the enforcement process. Once wage garnishment has been running for a period of time, the remaining balance gradually reduces with each payment cycle. Even though progress may seem slow from the outside, the system is designed to ensure that every deduction is properly applied until the debt is fully cleared. As time passes, updates in such cases usually become less about new legal actions and more about confirmation of progress. The key question is no longer what will happen next, but how much has already been paid and what remains. This is what defines the later phase of enforcement, steady reduction rather than new developments. Eventually, when the full amount has been recovered, the court records reflect that the judgment has been satisfied. At that point, the garnishment order is officially lifted and the enforcement process comes to an end. This marks the completion of the legal obligation and closes that specific chapter of the case. However, until that final point is reached, the system continues operating in a consistent and structured way. Payments are still processed, balances are still updated, and the legal framework remains in effect. There is no need for additional action unless something changes legally, such as a modification, settlement, or confirmation of full payment. In broader terms, this type of process shows how legal systems are built to ensure that court decisions are carried through to completion. Once a ruling enters enforcement, it remains active until its purpose is fully fulfilled. This creates a clear endpoint where every obligation is accounted for and resolved under court supervision. Ultimately, the situation moves in a single direction, toward closure. Each step, each payment, and each update contributes to that final resolution until the case reaches its official end and the enforcement process is fully ended. At this final stage of the process, the situation essentially becomes one of completion and final verification. Once all required payments have been fully collected through the garnishment system, the remaining balance is updated to zero, and the court officially confirms that the judgment has been satisfied. This confirmation is important because it marks the legal end of the obligation, not just the financial one. After satisfaction is recorded, the wage garnishment order is formally terminated. At that point, employers or financial institutions are no longer required to withhold any further funds, and the enforcement instructions are withdrawn. This ensures that the process does not continue beyond what is legally necessary. From an administrative standpoint, the case is then moved into a closed status within the court system. Records are still kept for documentation purposes, but no active collection takes place. If all conditions have been met, the matter is considered fully resolved under the court's authority. It's also at this stage that any remaining uncertainty disappears because the outcome is no longer in progress, it is finalized. What was once a disputed or unpaid obligation has now been fully processed through legal channels from start to finish. This is what gives the system its sense of closure and finality. In a broader sense, this type of resolution reflects how structured legal processes are designed to ensure accountability while also providing an endpoint. Once the order is fulfilled, there are no further steps required, and the case no longer continues in any active form. Ultimately, the process concludes where it was always intended to, with full enforcement completed, obligations satisfied, and the matter officially closed under court supervision. At this point, the situation naturally moves into a quiet final phase where everything becomes about confirmation and record-keeping rather than action. Once the legal obligation has been fully satisfied, the court's role is simply to verify that all required payments were completed correctly and that no balance remains outstanding. This verification is what formally finalizes the process. After that confirmation, all enforcement activity ends completely. Any wage garnishment orders are removed, and no further deductions are allowed. Employers and financial institutions are officially released from their responsibilities related to the case, and the legal instructions tied to collection are withdrawn. From there, the case exists only as a closed record within the court system. It is no longer active or ongoing, but preserved as part of legal documentation history. This ensures transparency and provides a reference if ever needed in the future, even though no further action takes place. At a practical level, this is the point where the matter is considered fully concluded in every sense, financially, legally, and procedurally. There are no remaining steps, no pending actions, and no further obligations connected to the original judgment. In the broader context, this final stage reinforces how legal systems are designed with a clear beginning, middle, and end. A judgment is issued, enforcement ensures compliance, and once fulfilled, the system officially closes the case. This structure ensures that every order has a defined resolution rather than remaining open-ended. Ultimately, once everything is completed and verified, the situation fully transitions out of the